A Cambridge police officer was justified in shooting and killing 20-year-old UMass Boston student Sayed Faisal earlier this year. That's the decision from a local judge who was asked by the Middlesex County District Attorney to independently review the shooting. Faisal was killed on January 4th after police responded to a 911 call that he had jumped out of an apartment and was cutting himself with a knife. According to the judge's report, Faisal first ran away from police, but later, after he was hit by one officer with a less than lethal round, then began walking towards another officer with his knife pointed out. That's when, according to this report, the second officer shot Faisal. The judge, who interviewed dozens of witnesses for his investigation, wrote, quote, "A reasonable law enforcement officer in the same position would reasonably believe that he, along with his fellow officers and others, were in imminent danger of being seriously injured or killed. But the investigation and the decision has done little to appease community outrage or concerns about how police respond to people in the middle of a mental health crisis." Well, joining me now to discuss all of this is Ken Reeves, former Cambridge mayor, who now heads the Cambridge NAACP, and Dr. Gregg Bloche, the Carmack Waterhouse Professor of Health Law, Policy, and Ethics at Georgetown University and co-director of the Georgetown Johns Hopkins Joint Program of Law and Public Health. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Great to be with you.
So, Ken, I want to start here in Cambridge. And how is the community, I guess, feeling after this judge's, decision or to this inquest?
Well, first, I want to just say to the family of Sayed Faisal that we're with them, and we do continue to feel their pain. The most beautiful thing about Cambridge in the 21st century is that we still do feel each and every death. Mm-hmm. So his loss has been a major issue in Cambridge, and the fact that this death was followed with so little transparency. I mean, this happened in January. We're getting the report in October. The judge interviewed up to 30 witnesses. Nobody from the public was there. So exactly how do we evaluate the judge's conclusion based on the zero information we have, this other from him? So the Canterburyans are not happy. And as we call ourselves the People's Republic, we really do expect more transparency. This information of who the shooter was should have been public long ago. There are no secrets in Cambridge. We all know who the shooter was.
Right, because this is when the first time we had the officer's name.
Yes, which is, it didn't serve the officer, and our purpose is not to demonize that person, but it would seem that this family would, in 9 months, should know who. Mm-hmm. It's just quite incongruous, and a lot of this is wrongful, and there's also no winners in this. Nobody won in this instance.
Yeah. And, Dr. Bloche, we were talking a little bit off camera about this tension between police and the communities, and also dealing with individuals who may or may not be suffering from mental health, and then having a situation like this. And we should note that, Mr. Faisal didn't necessarily have a mental health diagnosis at the time of this incident, but we know that it's a problem in many other incidents.
This is a gut-wrenching tragedy, and my heart goes out to the family that suffered this terrible loss that probably could have been avoided. There's a larger context here, and that is that across this country there are hundreds of thousands of police officers out on the street, most of whom are trying to do their job the right way, but who don't have basic training in how to deal with folks who are struggling with mental illness, who are struggling with substance abuse, and who are disturbed in ways that present behavior that's troublesome and even scary. And the problem is made worse by the reality that police culture is oftentimes a kind of macho culture, a kind of, as a colleague of mine who trains police puts it, a door knocker culture, meaning knocking down doors. That's the cool, manly thing to do amongst some police. And the result is that you get behavior on the street that can terrify anybody, certainly terrify folks who are emotionally or cognitively disturbed. A lot of people who are emotionally or cognitively disturbed have deficiencies of mental processing. And so imagine a group of several cops screaming at you. Sometimes, and I've seen videos along these lines, sometimes screaming obscenities, high volume, high pressured speech, and all of us, almost all of us, I submit, would have trouble processing that, would be terrified. But folks who have diminished biological ability to process commands and requests are going to be even more trouble. And some will react in ways that reflect their terror and that can in turn be scary to others. And so you have, when you have poor training and you have this kind of behavior by police, this aggressive behavior, as opposed to a more soothing approach.
You know, this case, though, is more complicated in this sense. In the People's Republic of Cambridge, we have a very well-resourced police department that believes that it has really turned the page on that old-style policing and that they very much do have training in dealing with mental health issues. And I myself have seen some extraordinary tapes of them facing into people who are just really mentally not there but aggressive. So in this case, we would say part of the facts here are that the police sergeant instructed one of the officers to shoot something like a stun gun, which did not work. So they were trying to do something gradual, but it didn't work at all. And the odd facts here are that the deceased never said a word for the entire time. So they don't know what his state of mind was, etc. And this knife, he was pointing to cut himself at all times. And if you really read the judge's decision closely, it says that he turned and the knife was in front of him. Now, is in front of him pointing toward the police officer, or is he just holding the knife in front of him? We don't get to know because we weren't there for the witnesses, etc.
Right.
But we know the distance that this police officer was that the officers were from the individual who was killed.
I think there's a dispute about the distance. But what I would like to know,
but an important dispute, though,
an important dispute because it has to go to whether or not the officers felt they were in danger, or were they actually in danger of being stabbed and things like that. And that is in dispute. That's a facts that are in dispute. But Dr. Bloche, I would love to know, even in the best case scenario, right, where you have a Cambridge Police Department that have gone through, modern training or progressive training and things like that, how do things like this happen, and what needs to be done going forward so that better outcomes happen, especially for folks who may be suffering from either acute mental episode or something that is diagnosable?
Well, I'm glad to hear that in Cambridge there is that kind of training, because that's something that sadly hasn't happened in most American police departments. That's a really important step forward. The question of training and the question of culture on the street, though, are different. Maybe there's even the question of culture in the squad car or amongst a group of just several cops who are on the beat together. This all needs to penetrate to the level of culture on the street. Now, another really important piece of this, and I don't know enough about the case to know how it played out in this case, but another really important piece is who gets the call when something is understandable as a mental health crisis. And so it does sound like there were initial signals that this was a matter of self-destructive behavior, not primarily a threat to others.
He had jumped through a window, broken through a window, jumped out the window, and was sitting down cutting himself with glass and this knife when they appeared.
Right.
No shoes on.
Why doesn't that lead to a call to emergency medical services, to mental health trained technicians that are part of EMS, et cetera? Now, you could imagine a scenario in which a call like this leads to both police and emergency medical services folks coming out. In some areas, there's been experimentation with especially mental health trained paraprofessionals rather than cops.
So bringing in more people on the force in these spaces probably could have changed the outcome. And so in the last minute here, because I want to make sure we get to the to wrap this segment up in a way where what do you think would help make the community whole in the last 40 seconds that we have? I know this is a complicated answer.
I'll try to be brief. I think that the biggest thing that this has led us to, because all of the things you would think, mental health workers, etc., the new city manager has said, you know, we're going to beef up and by next year we will have all that in place. This is an issue or area for invention. And Cambridge is the most innovative square mile in the universe. What happened? We need more means of subduing individuals, which is not with guns. The purpose of the police is to serve and protect us. It's not to kill us. So can we not give them more tools to subdue us when we are out of our mind for the moment that don't lead in our death? And so this is wrongful because of the outcome.
Right.
And there's no way, whatever the judge wrote, this is not the, and I bet no one, including the officer, this is not the outcome any of us would have wanted.
Right.
Why did we get it?
Right.
And I'm calling on our scientists at MIT and Harvard. Really, this, you know, if the gladiators had those nets they could throw over people, how come in the 21st century we're limited to stun guns? Or
exactly. And I think you and Dr. Bloche are saying the exact same thing. I'm going to have to leave the conversation there. Thank you, gentlemen, for so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Lively discussion, absolutely.